Hey guys, this morning we are going to look at connecting the tables of values you've been doing this week with the plotting of the points that we looked at in previous lessons. So first I'm going to start in Excel just so you can see what I'm doing on my screen and write down a rule: y equals x plus 1. And I'm going to make a table of values. You've seen these before. By typing in x and y, might make them bold. And the x values that I want to substitute and find for each of these values, what is y when x is these different values. So I'm going to just expand my screen and make my table centered, just so it's easier to see what I'm doing. Now I'll reduce it down again because we're going to be using GeoGebra in a minute too. Alright, so I've got my rule, y equals x plus 1. So what I'm going to type in here is what I'd usually write on the page, but you guys know already that when you use an Excel spreadsheet, if you press the equals button, Excel is going to do what your calculator usually does. It's going to calculate for us. So I'm going to say x, when x equals 0, y equals, using the rule, 0, what x is, plus 1. So I'm linking it to the cell B2. When x equals 0, y equals 0 plus 1. I'm going to press enter and it will calculate it for me. And sure enough, I know that 0 plus 1 is 1. So let's look at this one. When x equals 1, y is equal to, equals button, x1 plus 1. And we could press enter and keep going. 1 plus 1 is 2. Yep, I'm thinking and checking that what Excel is doing is what I actually know I've calculated the answer to be in my head. Always thinking and checking that a calculator or a spreadsheet is actually doing what we want it to do. Now I could keep going, do one after the other, but then what would be the point of doing it in Excel? There must be a quicker way. So once I've entered the relationship in once or twice, I can change the cursor from that white plus sign by going down to that little square in the bottom of the cell. So I've clicked on a cell, and when I move the mouse to the bottom right, it's changed to a thinner black plus sign. And I know that if I click that corner now, I can drag my formula across and it's going to fill the rest of the cells. So it's filled D3, D3, E3, and F3. Let's just check it did that correctly by clicking up here in the formula bar. So it's linking x equals 4 and adding 1. That's what our rule does. Our rule says whatever x is plus 1 more. So when x is 4, I add 1, I should get 5. Just press enter to escape from the formula bar. Yep, sure enough, y equals 5. Okay, what we're going to do now is plot these points. I have a point here, and I might just shade the backgrounds. I'll expand this again so that I can clearly see each point. So that's one set of points. When x equals 0, I've got the point y equals 1. Let's go across to this next point here. When I'll change the color so it's different, so we can see that it's different. When x equals 1, y equals 2. I've got another set of coordinates. I'll use another color. Any color will do. When x equals 2, y equals 3. And the reason I'm writing it like this is so that when I go to my Cartesian plane in a minute, I will be able to see what I'm doing very clearly and be able to read off this Excel spreadsheet the information quite quickly, so I can plot these points and see what they look like. I know that because they are part of a rule, they must somehow be related, but I want to explore what does this look like? What does this rule look like when we graph it? So what you're going to do next is go to geogebra.org. So I'll open up a new tab so you can see that from the start, geogebra.org. You may or may not have used this program before. And we're going to go to the classic view, GeoGebra Classic. Open that one up. Alright, and that will load. Now, I don't need any of this input information, and I don't need to see this. I'd rather see more of the graph. I'm going to zoom in. You can see the origin there, 0, 0. I can see all the grids. I'm going to graph these relationships. Let's start with the first pair of points, 0, 1. In the input down here, I'm going to put in the brackets like I normally do. Notice GeoGebra, as soon as you put in the open bracket, it puts in the closed bracket for you. So it's doing a bit of the work for us. When x equals 0, y equals 1. Now don't forget that comma. Now I've noticed straight away that GeoGebra's plotted the point up here for me, which is great. But when you press enter to finish inputting that point, GeoGebra gives the point a name, and because it's the first point, it just calls it A. So we don't need to worry about the letters, but just to note that the letters will keep coming after this A, then B, then C. So whatever order we plot our points, they're the names GeoGebra will give our points. So we start by opening brackets again. Let's plot that orange point. When x equals 1, y equals 2. Enter. Great, it's plotted it for us. Sure enough, when x equals 1, go across to the right one on the x-axis, y equals 2. If I hover over the point on the graph, it shows me those coordinates, so I can check that later as well. Alright, I'm going to quickly plot the rest. When x equals 2, y equals 3. When x equals 3, y equals 4. Now that's there, even though I can't see it, I can just drag the graph up, or I can scroll out, make it a bit bigger. And I've got one more. When x equals 4, y equals 5. So I want you to think about when you graph your relationship in a minute, can you see a pattern? We saw a pattern in the table of values. When x went from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, we saw the pattern in y equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I could guess that when x equals 5, y is going to equal 6. So let's drag that relationship across. We'll have to change the colour. Sure enough, yeah, when x equals 5, y equals 6. We could change that colour, but I'll just leave it for now. When x equals 5, y equals 6. Now, I don't want to keep plotting these points one at a time. So now that I've plotted the points, I'm going to go to this function up here in GeoGebra and draw a line. And there's all these different types of lines we can draw. But the one we don't want a segment, because the segment would only join between 2 points or 3 points or specific points. We want to draw a whole line. We want to see if we can extend this relationship without drawing a giant table of values. So I'll start at A, and I want to connect A to my last point, E, and see if GeoGebra can line them up. Okay, so if I point it to B, it would fit through C and D and E all at once. Great. So I've got a line now, and this line represents the rule we've been working with, y equals x plus 1. So I'm going to go to this point function up here and see if I can create a point F. When x equals 5, y equals 6. We plotted it over here in Excel, 5, 6. X equals 5, y equals 6. But I want to check that it does lie on the line. Oops. Just press undo. I got a bit excited and clicked on the page. Alright, I want to plot just a normal point, and I'm going to plot it on my graph instead of inputting it. So when x equals 5, go up, y equals 6. I'm going to plot that point there. And I've noticed that it falls on the line as well. I'd like you to come up with some more points that fall on the line and write them down in your book or in your spreadsheet. And then we're going to look at another pattern after that.